our lovely interview with Ava, now star of pod and screen. And then a discussion with a representative from Goddard Riverside to talk about youth programming.
So moved.
And we need to mention that Blanche has a dispensation because she's for a medical dispensation to attend remotely. All right. Ava, do you want to tell us a little bit about IncludeNYC or our guest?
Yeah, so I guess I could say I actually met Colin Montgomery, who works with IncludeNYC and who will be presenting for us tonight through the podcast I did with Chalkbeat in the Bell. So Colin is a friend of Taylor McGraw, who was the founder and executive director of the Bell, which is a youth, an organization that allows for youth to have audio training. So they run a lot of internship programs over the summer and school year. So it's a great organization. So that's how I met Colin. IncludeNYC does a lot of work with youth who have special needs or disabilities. They work with anyone from, I think, school-age children till around mid to late 20s, but I'm sure Colin will have more exact information. And it's just an organization dedicated to helping disabled students get accommodations or resources they thrive. So, yeah.
And then I think we told Colin 45, so maybe he's not here yet. Does that know? So maybe we'll talk about the podcast a little, because I do have a question. Is who runs the Bell? Like, are they affiliated with like Chalkbeat or anything else, or they're their own little entity?
So they're their own entity. The podcast that 11 students and professional journalists are working on is actually a collaboration between Chalkbeat and the Bell. So these organizations have not worked together in the past, but they've been needing to because Chalkbeat covers a lot of education related news, specifically focusing on youth. And the Bell has existed in order to support young people learn how to have careers in journalism and specifically audio journalism. So the two came together to pilot this new internship program. So we're the first cohort they've ever had. So it's 11 students from across New York City, from different boroughs and just different experiences. And we all come together to talk about issues and create podcast episodes on issues within the New York City.
That's cool. And when the internships from when to when?
It started at the end of January and it goes until some point in June. That point is undetermined. Depends how long it takes us to finish all that.
Yeah.
And how do you decide what issues you're going to address?
So at the beginning of the program, we were all allowed to pitch an idea for an episode. So some of us were immediately asked to create reporting plans and ideas for what an episode could look like. And a lot of episodes were kind of left as blanks because the program wanted to see if there were any podcast episodes about breaking news that we'd want to do or other unique opportunities that would come up. An example of this is that an episode coming out the week after spring break is an interview with Chancellor Banks that some students were able to conduct. So it's really just some of them have been planned out by students, pitched by students. They've been in the works for months now, and others are just like unique opportunities that come up or new ideas. So yeah,
It's cool. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
And how did you feel the experience was? Like, doing your own podcast, like the one you were in?
Well, it was definitely fun. I did the Bell's summer program called the Summer Youth Podcast Academy. So I'd had an experience creating a podcast episode before. But that one was like, I took on all the roles for one episode, meaning like I did the research, interviewing, and engineering, since there's a lot of kind of engineering and producing involved in creating audio journalism and making it sound professional. Whereas with this one, there's 11 students who are divided into two cohorts. So there's about 5 or 6 students working on each episode. So in each episode, I have a specific role. Well, every other episode, I have a specific role, and we have like professional journalists working with us. So it's definitely a really unique experience, and it's really collaborative, and really interesting and enjoyable. So yeah.
That's great. I've done a lot of work with Chalkbeat over the years because they are the kind of the voice of education in New York, right? And they're national, but I look through the New York lens. So I think it's exciting to get to work with them directly as well.
It's really amazing. We have reporters from Chalkbeat coming in and working with us like every day that we meet. So I've gotten to go on multiple kind of reporting trips with Chalkbeat reporters and Lauren and Murat. So it's definitely been a really unique and exciting.
Amazing. It's really exciting.
And is journalism what you want to pursue in?
Possibly. I'm not gonna major in journalism because I feel like journalism is a very specific major, and I'd rather major in like English and something related to like political science or international relations. And then from there, if I decide to go to journalism, I'll have the tools to pursue a career in journalism without being restricted to it. So I feel like pursuing a major that only leads to one career might irritate. Yeah, exactly.
Have there been opportunities to kind of get to meet journalists from other audio venues like television or radio and other, famous podcasters?
For this specific program, not yet. I mean, we're all given a mentor who
Right.
works on a specific podcast. So individually every week we get to meet with someone who's in audio journalism as a professional career. But over the summer, every day we had someone come in and present to us and teach us how to do something. So we had people who work at NPR come in and other just incredible podcasts. So I've gotten to meet a lot of people through the 2 summer programs.
Because I think it's great opportunity to kind of
it really is,
network
yeah.
and build those relationships, which are really important, especially if you want to pursue that career. Yeah. By the way, you did an outstanding job.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you. But I see Colin has joined us. Hi there, Colin.
Hello.
Hey, so I think you spoke to Alex. I don't know if you have a deck, but I'd love it if we can speak to Colin Montgomery, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about Include and give us your kind of pitch. And then if we have a Q&A, I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, good evening. It's a real privilege to join the community board this evening. I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you, Ava, for connecting me with this body, and thank you everyone for all you do. It's obviously super important work, democracy at the local level. So appreciate all that. I'll screen share in just a moment. I was just curious, it doesn't look like I have access to the chat. And if I wanted to drop links into the chat, like our website, and we have a flyer for an upcoming event, maybe Alex, maybe that's a question for you. Would you be able to bump my access up to chat?
Unfortunately, we actually don't have a chat.
Oh.
We just have the Q&A. So if there are any links that you'd like us to share, feel free to send them my way. And I'd be
Okay,
happy.
sure. In the Q&A? Or just
yeah, or you
after?
could just email me.
Yeah, no problem. I'll do that. So I'll send our website. We have a great event that's happening in person outdoors as well, called Outdoors for Autism. So I will mention that, and I'll share the flyer for that with you after the presentation. Okay, so let me pull this up. Screen share. Just give me one moment. And thank you for accommodating me. I know we're zoomed out probably at this point, but this was really convenient because I was unable to, for me personally, I was unable to join in person this evening. All right, so you're able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. And then if I move over to our website, because I'll plan to do that at certain times, you're able to see our website?
Yes.
Okay, all right, excellent. Thank you for confirming. All right, so I will talk about IncludeNYC. And my name's Colin Montgomery. I'm a senior family educator at IncludeNYC. I've worked at Include for almost 7 years now, which is hard to believe just how time has passed, over the span of those 7 years. My background is, prior to joining Include, I was a middle school special education teacher. I was a special education coordinator, instructional coach. So I worked in the classroom for 4 years and then coached other teachers and ran IEP meetings. And I worked at a middle school in Brooklyn. And I really was keen on learning how to better support students and families all around the city. So I wanted to kind of better understand broadly what kind of challenges looked like for students and families, and moving a bit beyond just what my kind of school level look at some of those challenges was. And I worked at a charter school, so whether you're at a charter school versus a traditional public school, right, District 1 through 32, whether you're the students attending a private school and the like, the challenges around education, special education, obviously can look quite a bit different across the boroughs and the schools that students are attending. So I got connected with IncludeNYC just a bit by chance, and I'll advance our next slide. When I was looking for jobs around the time that I applied for Include, I went on a city website and it listed advocacy organizations, and it listed IncludeNYC. And IncludeNYC, once upon a time, was called Resources for Children with Special Needs, because we're a 40-year-old organization, and folks are sometimes familiar with that previous name of the organization. So we've been around for 40 years. We were founded by 3 moms of kids with disabilities back in 1983. And we're the leading source of training and information for young people ages birth to 26 with known or suspected disabilities, their families, and the professionals who support them. And we rebranded, changed our name from Resources for Children with Special Needs back in 2015. Because as you may know, may have observed, language obviously has changed quite a bit in many different areas, right? As we're trying to keep up to date with the best way that folks are identifying and advocacy groups, and people with disabilities choose to identify. And so special needs, we still hear it at times, but it's been considered by disability rights activists and self-advocates to be a bit euphemistic. The language under the Americans with Disabilities Act or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, right, clearly states disability, and disability is a protected class in the US. So we moved away from using the term special needs and more toward, we certainly use the term disability whenever we're helping families and professionals navigate options and challenges, but we wanted to really embody in our name what our vision is, what our mission is, which is that every young person be fully included in school, in the workforce, and in the community in New York City, and should therefore have the resources, services, and supports to succeed around that. So we do a wide variety of different types of work, and one of the projects and grants that allows us to work with schools and professionals is our work as a family and community engagement center. So we serve in that capacity for early childhood and school age across all 5 boroughs. And we've served in a similar role, just depending on the grant project, the name of our organization might change. So we get grant funding through the state education department to provide training and family engagement around special education and navigating disability systems. We used to be called Special Education Parent Center. So this is just an evolution of the name under one of our main kind of missions and types of work that we do. We're now considered a Family and Community Engagement Center, or FACE Center. And one helpful just kind of connection to make to all the documents that you get as a parent or someone working in a school as a professional, let's say. If a student has an IEP, an individualized education program, right, which is a special education service plan, there's always paperwork that will summarize, in addition to a family getting the IEP, there's paperwork called a prior written notice that summarizes the main changes that have happened. If a student got evaluated for the first time, let's say, if services got recommended, if services got removed at a student's annual IEP meeting, there is this notice called a prior written notice. And our information, our phone number for our helpline to support families is listed on that paperwork that any family who has a student with an IEP in New York City will receive. So it's just helpful to know that we're also listed on official Department of Education paperwork that notes the major changes to a student's IEP and lists the resources that families can consult if they have questions. Please just let me mute for one moment. There's a fire truck close by, as you can probably hear. And I'm broadcasting to you from another borough. I'm in Brooklyn, so I live a couple blocks away from a firehouse. So this is I'm very used to it, but I always want to obviously let people know. Hey, it'll just be a moment. Let me just talk a bit about our reach across New York City, what our footprint looks like. You no doubt can see that these are our stats from 2022. So you may be familiar with, you know, as nonprofits update their annual statistics and they put out annual reports, there's usually a bit of a lag, like a year lag. So we're in the process of finalizing, putting out our 2023 statistics, and they'll be updated on our website and put in our annual report. So I've certainly asked our communications team, which kind of leads on this, like, hey, can we share the stats from last year? That would be most helpful. But they're saying patience, patience. So anyway, these are our stats from 2022. So I'll start with folks we've served, over 14,300 people. So that looks like folks that we connected with in presentations or workshops. So this is a presentation kind of overview of our organization that would count toward that. And we do a wide variety toward that number. We do a wide variety of workshops for early childhood, school-age children, and then also in mapping out life after high school, and then in navigating various disability service systems that exist outside the school system. So the top workshop topics from 2022 were understanding your child's IEP. We have a school age and early childhood version of that because the IEP looks a little different whether you're in early preschool or K through 12. We have an advocacy skills for families training that we do regularly. This training, Positive Solutions for Families, is around supporting positive behaviors for students. It's more geared toward early childhood, preschool age. We have an explicit vocabulary instruction for parents, so helping support student learning around vocabulary learning. And then we have a training that we do called Family Engagement, Communication, and Culture that is often directed toward schools to help them think about how they are, you know, being culturally responsive, being thoughtful, and actually partnering with families rather than just sharing info in this one-sided way, which we know can be a challenge, you know, because that's kind of how the systems are set up, is there's so much information for school staff to share, and there's little time for families and schools to partner effectively. So moving from this kind of one-sided model where the school is gatekeeping and sharing info and their availability selectively, and how to better partner with families in a more responsive way. So any of those trainings that we did, and we have many other trainings that we do as well, those all count toward that number served. Additionally, we have a helpline. So we have phone assistance that we can provide to folks, whether you're a parent, you're a professional, you're an individual with a disability. Birth to 26 is the age range of where our knowledge is and where we can be most helpful. If someone were over age 26, you know, someone were inquiring about an individual who's 30, let's say, who has a disability or disabilities, they're looking for resources and support, we'll know where to refer them. You know, there are community agencies that can support and have the best kind of assistance in supporting adults with disabilities. And the helpline topics, the main categories where we're helping folks on these special education disability topics range from just general process and guidance, you know, understanding what the IEP process looks like depending on the age of the student. Hey, my child's in a charter school, my child's in a District 1 through 32 school. You may have heard of District 75, which is a citywide specialized program for students with disabilities. You know, we certainly can help in calls around those, private school calls, if a student were in a specialized program like the NEST program for students with autism, there's a variety of kind of smaller programs that are specialized to different disability types that are in the District 1 through 32 schools. We can really, in short, meet folks where they're at. They go through anyone who calls us. We can first off speak to you in your language. We can connect to interpreters in 200 languages. We have a lot of directly knowledgeable bilingual staff in Spanish who can provide direct Spanish language assistance. So we can meet folks where they're at. They'll call us, or they can complete an online form. There will be a quick intake, and that helps folks like myself just have a real sense of, okay, what the kind of need looks like. And then when we speak to folks, we can speak to them up to an hour, really make sure we understand what their need is, what the kind of facts are, and then we kind of walk through the situation together. There's a lot of questions at the start, and then once we have a clear sense of what the need or the challenge is, folks like myself, the family educators or senior family educators, will help walk through potential options. So whether it's, okay, I think my child needs to be evaluated for dyslexia, right? I'm just having so much of a concern about them reading, right? How could you do that partnering with the school, or are there options to do that outside of school, right? It might look a little different. If you were looking for outside resources, we have quite a bit of expertise about what's available in the community and what the big agency providers are that have expertise around disability support. So we're always looking to help folks take practical next steps and really make sure they understand that there's one or more options available to them. We do not decide for people, and we are not advocates, and we are not doing casework. We're doing, in some cases, one-off assistance for people who are basically strangers. But this is a phone assistance model that we've used for decades, and it works really well. Sometimes folks will be like, hey, I got your number. They'll call us from that form, that DOE form I was describing, the prior written notice. They're like, who are you? Here's my issue. And, by the end of the call, it's like we've known each other for years, So they have confidential assistance from people who really know the lay of the land and can help. And we're all matched to connect with someone on a call based on what our expertise looks like, right? So I'm not going to take early childhood calls because my expertise is more kindergarten through after high school. I know a lot about charter schools, having taught at a charter school, can take a call like that, right? But our staff are, if not family members of people with disabilities, they're former teachers or social workers. So we all approach the work with a real lived connection in terms of what supporting people with disabilities looks like in New York City. So that's just an overview of just will always want to plug the helpline. And I have a slide that gives the info, our number and everything. But I just wanted to really walk through it while I'm kind of talking about how many people we serve. So we usually get over 3,000 people that call our helpline each year and have those phone appointments. There's no cap on how many times you can call us. We don't do like, oh, it's one a month. It's just if you need, and you'll be assigned to us. And if we don't have the answer as an organization, we'll refer you out. So anything special education, school placement, students going from preschool into kindergarten, students going, into middle school, high school, right? What does college look like if my child had a disability? They had an IEP, right? We can help with that. Behavior supports, obviously, we know is a big challenge, and it has been a pretty persistent challenge, ever since the pandemic. And then we know that there's also a lot of issues with students not getting their services, right, in New York City. So we help families understand what their rights are to hopefully get all those services, in place in school. And if that isn't possible, there's ways to get services outside of school. So that's just a little pitch about our helpline. So the number of people we served is around 15,000 people a year. I think I peeked at our stats from last year, was a little bit higher than 14,300. So events, workshops, we do in-person workshops and events for sure. But we still, are rocking with virtual on a regular basis too. And then the people that we've reached, that number is so much larger because, that number includes our social media footprint, our website traffic, So, you know, we have quite a large footprint in terms of people accessing our resources and our newsletters. And we partner with a lot of community partners, whether it's schools, community-based organizations throughout all 5 boroughs. We have a dedicated Staten Island team, just for what it's worth. When I first started at Include, we did not have a presence really on Staten Island. We didn't even have the contract to provide special education support in Staten Island. But the landscape has changed, and we've been fortunate to really be able to extend our support to Staten Island. So, quick overview of, you know, how we've operated, how many people we've served, reached. I'll pause there. I know I've said a lot. I'm happy to continue on. I have a few more slides, but welcome any initial questions you have. I'll also check the Q&A.
Hi, Colin. Kevin Reevey. I'm one of the co-chair. I am the co-chair of YEL. And I was just curious how families that need your services, how do they know that your organization exists? And then the other part of that question is, how do you ensure that you're reaching all communities and that all communities know that these services that your organization has exist?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. So it's essential for us to have these community partners, right? And it's, you know, this number wasn't just 400 overnight, right? We've had staff. I have colleagues who have been at the organization for over 20 years, over 10 years, right? Who have been really instrumental in creating long-term partnerships with community-based organizations. We've made really great strides, for example, in being able to better serve folks in Spanish and in Mandarin. So we've really broadened our on-the-ground reach in terms of supporting families, Spanish-speaking families and students. And just to give you a sense for our website, you can toggle from English to Spanish. Our Spanish website is literally written by, you know, Spanish-speaking folks, folks who are, you know, native speakers, fully literate in Spanish. So this is not just like, oh, from Google Translate. Like, we have a fully accessible, tailored Spanish language website that reflects, you know, us having the staff and us knowing Spanish language communities, Spanish-speaking communities all throughout the city. So just in terms of, we made great strides in terms of engaging community-based organizations and then Spanish-speaking communities throughout the city, and that took a good amount of time. And of course, you know, we're a fairly small organization. You know, we're about 50 staff, right? We have this fantastic responsibility that's so important to be the kind of trusted third-party support to help folks navigate the special education and disability service systems in New York City. But knowing that you're always doing that with limited resources, we have to be really strategic in terms of how we get our word out, how we are sharing information about ourselves. We work very closely with the New York City Public Schools, New York City Department of Ed. When I first started at IncludeNYC, our approach to doing workshops was much more working with parent coordinators at schools. So we've been in schools across all 5 boroughs for decades doing workshops. Some of the workshops I mentioned, like understanding your child's IEP, advocacy skills for families. We partner with the UFT each year. I was just at a UFT counselors conference a couple weeks ago, talking about helping support students who are moving from high school into adult life, college, work, so forth, and they have IEPs. There's a specific specific type of support that's supposed to be noted in the IEP for students who are transitioning out of high school. So whether it's the major institutions in the city, you know, council members, community boards, CECs, we do presentations like this in addition to our more, you know, content specific workshops on a regular basis to make sure that we're getting the word out. I've gone to public advocate forums and presented about IncludeNYC. I've gone to borough president forums in the past. So we really do try to be involved at kind of all layers of, you know, the key institutions and working with the really credible messengers such as yourselves and getting the word out, but also within the schools and in partnering with the community-based organizations. But of course, there's limits, right? We have access to 200 languages, but our data show in terms of folks who call us, it's primarily Spanish-speaking families and then Mandarin-speaking families, some Cantonese as well. I think Arabic is the fourth biggest language, but knowing, the complexities of newly arrived families coming into the city, the challenges that they're facing, we're not necessarily, meeting folks who could really benefit from our services in that regard. And that's something that we continue to reflect on. So just being, candid about that. So I hope that answers in a general sense your question. I mean, it is the right question. And we have a community partnerships team, who they engage with politicians, community-based organizations, guide the kind of strategy of how we're partnering with community-based organizations, other nonprofits, and really making sure we're not just concentrated in, this part of Manhattan or this part of Brooklyn. We're really being out there as broadly as we can.
I was just going to ask you about the children of the migrants, so you've already answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Kirsten, Blanche, Lawton, I have a question.
Blanche.
You have 406 partners, I think you call them. Do you overlap or with any of them?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So, so we, among partners like nonprofits that are quite visible in advocacy and disability services and supports in the city. One of them you might be familiar with, Advocates for Children.
Right.
We share a contract with them. That's federal special education parent support. So we formally partner with them, on a grant project. And we're also part of committees that are, there's advocacy groups, that really hold the Department of Education's feet to the fire around how are you serving students with disabilities, give us information. Busing is a big issue year after year. So Advocates for Children convenes an advocacy group that really gets the information from the DOE, in a proactive way. So it isn't just coming out, in drips and drabs through newspaper articles and at city council hearings. So we partner with Advocates for Children, formally on grant projects and also in kind of more political advocacy work. Although we are not a formal advocacy organization in the way that they are, and we are not attorneys. But yeah, we complement each other. We don't see us being, in competition. We also partner with Synergia, which provides a lot of fantastic Spanish language support in the city. They're on that same contract that Advocates for Children is on with us. So they are located in East Harlem, they're right by the 456 125th Street stop. And they have
when you say you partner with Synergia or Advocates, what do you mean you have a contract with them?
Well,
Because
so go ahead.
What concerns me is there are a number of resource agencies such as yourself, Synergia, and loads of others with all the information and resources, but the end users often don't know that any of you exist. That's bothersome. The users don't seem to know that the resources are there. So how can we address that?
Yeah, that's a huge kind of systemic question. We are always careful to share, the organizations of places, information about organizations like Advocates for Children and Synergia, anytime it seems appropriate. Synergia has autism programming that we don't provide, kind of for parents and supporting students. We'll share that information. And that's just on our end, but you're asking a larger question, it sounds like, in terms of, really how to really accessibly share key information about organizations like us. In my mind, I know that we've engaged with council members and community boards throughout the city. But, you know, I don't think we do like every community board, each week we go from community board to community board. It might be less kind of formalized like that. So if there's any way that you could share the word about, you know, our 3 organizations, for example, and include their, you know, all our services are free and open to the public. We're not trying to, you know, charge any of our services. We just want to get the information out. We want to help people who would benefit from our resources. So we think that we really broadly connect well with the school system, but I think leveraging organizations like the community boards, each community board, really across the city, but especially in Manhattan, since our organization is, our office is on 36th and 8th. You know, Advocates for Children is very close to us. I think they're on 31st. Center He is on 125th Street. I mean, every community board in Manhattan, every city council member office, you know, any of the city agencies should have our information so that anyone who's connecting with resources generally, if the word disability ever comes up, you know, they have access to our info. We've connected with the mayor's office for people with disabilities as well. You know, we partnered with them in the past. They certainly have our info. But yeah, I think you're asking the right question. I wish I had the answer, you know.
Yeah, we all do, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's I love when people just pose the questions like that clearly, because I'm like, yeah, that's it, you know. I'm gonna have to jump at 7:20, just so folks know. I'm happy to take questions until then, but I do have a hard out. That's why I had to present remotely tonight. So I mentioned our top workshop topics. I can show you on our website how folks can access our workshops. We have workshops in person and then virtually. So go to IncludeNYC.org. You can click events. And as you see, we have a wide variety of topics. You know, more often there's more than one workshop on a given day of the week, right? So if we go to tomorrow, there's a training, Positive Solutions for Families. And this training actually is more than once. It's a 6-week training. Folks can join, you know, midway, but this is kind of an exceptional training. That's more of a training series. So they can just simply click on that event through our calendar. Then it will give an overview of the training, and they can register. And if it's virtual, they'll just be prompted to complete the Zoom registration. In terms of other ways, other large events that we have upcoming, I wanted to mention, we have one of our biggest community events, which is called Outdoors for Autism. And I just changed from a week view to a month view, by the way. You can do that, you know, just by going right on the website. So we have Outdoors for Autism. So, and as you see, I clicked from month to month, it will also prompt you. You can review the events kind of in a list if that's easier, because I know the calendar can look a bit cramped. But this is one of our largest in-person events. So we host this event in the Bronx. This is the Reverend T. Wendell Foster Park. It's right by Yankee Stadium. There's a park just north of Yankee Stadium, and this is the park. We partner with the city council. We get city council money as part of a city council autism initiative. So that's why we present. That's why we do this event at this park and in the Bronx each year. Part of the city council autism initiative. I don't fully remember the details as to why, you know, it's required to be in the Bronx, but I think it's in part just with the commitment to kind of equity, and where families, you know, who have fewer accesses to resources or events like this, we make sure to center this event, you know, in the South Bronx. So we have a lot of great partners. We get hundreds of attendees each year. So it's usually kids and their families. You know, but professionals are welcome to come as well. Or if you're, hey, I'm not coming with the kid just to check it out, you know, certainly welcome. So it's targeted toward young people with autism, birth to age 18 and their families. But again, we're not going to, you know, be screening by disability. We just want to make sure folks who would want to come out and have a really nice community event are able to come out. We'll have plenty of folks who can speak to folks in Spanish. We may also have Mandarin interpretation, but I'm not certain about that since they probably would have listed that here. And I just want to show you as well, we have this nice jazzy flyer. So when I follow up and share the materials in our website, I'll share the link on our website for how to register, but I'll also share this flyer in case you want to broadcast that out. And it's got a nice QR code, and so folks can just access the registration and get connected to our website. So I wanted to be sure to mention that event. I thought I saw something in the Q&A. I saw a notification, sorry. I wanted to just show a couple other slides and welcome any questions before I hop off. I talked about the helpline, I think, pretty extensively. The number for our helpline, don't worry, it is here. It is on the last slide that I'll share. And you can easily access our helpline information on our website, go to our main page, or you can just click from the drop-down, get help, helpline. This is Vicky. Vicky is one of our intake associates. She's phenomenal. She's been with us for 5 years. These days, this is a little confusing. I don't quite know why they have it written up like this. These are the live hours for folks to speak to someone like Vicky and her colleague, Isamar, and they're both bilingual. They're fluent in Spanish. This is, if you want to, set up an appointment live, you can call them at this time, but you can also call after hours. You can call on a Friday. This is just when they are taking calls and scheduling calls live or calling people back if they miss them. Okay. But this doesn't mean that, you can only speak to someone from 9 to 3. Like I do calls at 4 o'clock on a Friday. I have colleagues who do calls 8 a.m. We do calls in the evening sometimes, right? So this is just to connect to our helpline team live. And for Spanish, you can connect to us through WhatsApp as well. And there's also a text feature for English and Spanish. And if someone were to call the main English language number and state their language, if they needed Mandarin, if they needed Bengali, Russian, Haitian Creole, what have you, we can connect back to them with an interpreter. And there's also the option, rather than just calling our phone line, you can complete a form to get help. And then if you go to our Spanish language website, this form will be in Spanish. So I just wanted to be sure to show you that. I saw some folks who were taking screenshots or taking a photo while I was advancing the slides. So just want to make sure you were clear on that. Yes, Roberta. You're muted.
I have a quick question. CB7 is part of D3 Open Arms, which is a group for District 3 schools on the Upper West Side that includes the schools and includes a whole bunch of organizations that are helping asylum seekers. And one of our concerns is that many of the children have moved out of the district, even though they're still entitled to go to the same public school because of the 60-day notice. And our concerns are about, especially with children who have special needs.
Sure. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question there. Is it just like the best way to support families,
Right.
in that situation? Yeah.
And we don't know where they've moved. And the problem is DHS doesn't tell us where they've moved to. So
yeah. No, it's tough because that's like, how are they even going to know to call us?
right.
I know I'm certain that I have data colleagues that we're tracking, calls from families who are identifying as, saying we're recently arrived or, asylum
Right.
seekers. I'm trying to think. So in terms of if someone were to move, and certainly the right to school, Advocates for Children has a technical assistance center around the rights of being in temporary housing and the right to remain in school. They have the McKinney-Vento, which is a federal law, you know, covering that.
Right.
If you're aware, yeah. So they have a lot of expertise around supporting families around their rights with that.
So maybe we should invite them to one of our meetings.
Yeah, it could be good. I just think they'd have a better policy kind of view
Okay.
of how to support, because they do advocacy around students in temporary housing. You know, I think juvenile involved youth as well. We don't have as big of a kind of policy footprint in that regard.
Right.
So 100%, if you're ever coming into contact with folks who aren't as aware of their rights, especially around special education. I've worked with a couple schools and they told me, oh, families are newly arrived and their kid was just like forced to get an IEP because they're an English language learner. Like that is absurd. That's illegal.
Correct.
Not being
Right.
right. Anything like that, we could definitely help families, you know, if they're connected with us, understand what their rights are. But in terms of like the best way to communicate that at the local level, and if folks are kind of literally moving from one place to another, and then you can't even track their movement. I think a place like Advocates for Children could be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, I mean, I know with the public school system, they're not fully up to the challenge and supporting families around this. I do know that there's student and temporary housing coordinators, you know, at shelters.
Right.
They hopefully have our information, you know, so anything around special education or disability specific. That's why I think to Blanche's earlier point, it's like either Advocates for Children, Include, or Synergia, we can help. And if we don't have the answer ourselves, we will connect you to one of those other organizations because we complement each other well. Or, you know, another organization. We connect folks to attorneys if they want. You know, I'll connect folks to legal services, right? I think legal services or legal aid might have similarly to Advocates for Children. I know they're doing advocacy, at least from what I'm reading, you know, in terms of, right to shelter and everything. Some of those public interest attorney organizations are doing really important work around that. And they could have good answers as well in terms of what is the concrete step to get someone the information that they need around right to school, right to remain in school, getting busing to school, getting Metro cards, right? So I think any kind of public interest attorney organization could be helpful as well.
The problem is, of course, that some of them have moved so far away that it's really hard to get a young child to
It's
their
tough.
original school.
Yeah, because you can tell someone, oh yeah, you can take a bus and they'll get bused to school. But then if you're, you know, folks who are residing at like Floyd Bennett Field Complex, and your school's in District 3, come on, it's ridiculous, right? That's just not tenable. So I hear you. I am gonna have to hop off, unfortunately, but I really appreciate this opportunity, everybody. I know I was, you know, jumping around a little bit. I always got to pick my spots depending on the questions I'm getting and, you know, the time, but I hope that this was helpful. There's more, you know, information, a couple slides I didn't cover. And I guess the last thing I would say before I jump, besides thank you, I really do appreciate this opportunity. Besides Outdoors for Autism, the big events that we do each year, we do a disability resource fair called the IncludeNYC Fair. Now that happens in the winter because it shares a lot of info around summer camps for students with disabilities. And we want folks to get a head start on knowing what's available in summer camp. So that happened in February. And then each fall we do College is Possible, which helps students with IEPs and their families understand what college access looks like if you have a disability, whether you're graduating with a diploma or if you're leaving school with a non-diploma credential. Because if we're thinking about students with more significant disabilities who aren't graduating high school with diplomas, there are alternative college programs that some of the large disability service agencies partner with CUNY around in the city. And we have CUNY come to that event. It's a great resource, and you just follow our website. You know that event happens each October. So when I send the information, and I'll follow up with you, Alex. I'll note the dates of these events just so you can kind of keep track. You know, so I hope that's helpful. Thank you for all you do and for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And Ava, shout out to all you did. reaching out to me with the podcast. It's fantastic stuff. I was hearing you kind of talking about it a bit as I hopped on, and just love it. Keep up all that great work.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, it was my
And
pleasure.
Colin,
Yeah, go ahead.
follow up with me now, because I have some like specific budget questions around ways Include could be better supported. And I don't know if you have grants through city council or any funding streams that way, but that's one area where as a community board, we like to advocate for the services in our city or district.
Yeah, I love that. Who is saying that? Just so I can make a note.
Sorry, I'm Kristen Berger, one of the co-chairs.
Hey, Kristen. Yeah. We corresponded via email. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I think the best person I can put you into touch with is Lori, who's our policy director, because I know we're definitely at city council. City council knows us and we get city council money, but we'll always welcome an opportunity like that. So 100%. And thank you for that.
Yeah, that's like a great tangible for us. So
Yeah.
I'll talk to her.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all you do. And I hope you have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
All right.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
All right. My pleasure. You take care. Goodbye.
That was someone who held us on the and we're not always so good, but we have our next speaker lined up, I see. So everybody's on time tonight. We have Damian Samuels, right, from Goddard Riverside. So Goddard kind of knows the drill because you guys talk to us a lot at community board. Usually like once a year you come in and talk to us about, I guess, a little bit about what you're doing right now in the district. And then we'd also like to find out, same thing as I just offered Colin, ways that we can advocate on your behalf in like the city budget or in city council.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the audience. I'm Damian Samuels. I'm the Associate Vice President for Youth Services at Goddard Riverside. So obviously my lens will be tilted a bit toward youth services. Obviously, I can certainly speak about other programs. As you know, Goddard Riverside is one of the largest CBOs in New York City with a history over 100 years. We are now at 38 sites, so me attempting to describe all of them might be a little challenging. But I did just put a couple slides together. I'm not sure if I could share the screen.
Yeah, that would be terrific. I think Alex will do that with you.
So just again, we certainly can go into the history, but I think you're very familiar with Goddard Riverside Community Center. Here, again, just as a picture of our executive director, Dr. Roderick Jones, along with some elected officials as we launched our COFA program. COFA is creating opportunities for Amsterdam, which is located in Amsterdam houses, excuse me, just in the shadow, obviously, of Lincoln Center. And a really exciting program brought to us with funding from Gail Brewer, Linda Rosenthal, and Adrian Adams. And this program really attempts to take a different strategy toward public safety. A lot of the public safety dollars that were issued through discretionary contracts went for things like lighting and cameras, and we certainly know those things are important. But we took a different tact, which was to really try to engage those young people, youth and young adults that we know are sort of out in the community, frankly, the ones who are disengaged. And unfortunately, as we know, a lot of the sort of petty crimes that happen in our communities are often from young people who don't have either steady streams of income or some kind of program to attach to. And so this program has really made some headways in its first year. We've served almost over 100 young people. We've really targeted some of what we call the street leaders and have used a credible messenger approach where we've employed people from the neighborhood who have long ties in the community. And one of the people you see there is Andrew Black, who created a nonprofit. He's from that community and created a nonprofit that works extensively with Lincoln Center. And so really having exciting results around really pivoting toward thinking about public safety more broadly and thinking about how can we engage young people specifically, as we know that those unfortunately sometimes are the drivers of some of the issues that we see in the neighborhood. So I wanted to highlight just that one program, but I'll give a brief overview of some of the youth programs within Goddard Riverside, and I manage a number of these, and then my colleague Chad Franklin manages the remainder. But they're kind of on the left are programs that are actually in your district, in the congressional, in the community board. And then the other programs on the right are other pretty large programs that certainly serve young people across the city. Those programs do not have a geographic restriction, so I'll certainly talk about those separately, although they do exist outside of the community board. The Star Learning Center is on 84th Street. The Star Learning Center offers educational advocacy and tutoring supports. As I heard my colleague in the prior presentation talk about advocates for children, we are well familiar, and if you're not, please do so. They are a fantastic resource for holding the New York City public schools accountable, as there are many issues, particularly with English language learners, as was suggested, but also with students with disabilities. And so Star Learning Center really does educational advocacy in addition to providing long-term tutoring and educational supports. One of the awesome opportunities is we certainly encourage people to volunteer within that program. Volunteers tend to stay for a long time. There is a really in-depth approach to the Star Learning Center's model, and where we've had many tutors who stay 10 years. They have literally been with someone from, second grade up through completion of high school, and they'll transition to other tutors. And so that program really has deep roots in the community. And so we've been excited to work with them and to work with the community through our Star Learning Center. Again, also in the community board is the Goddard Beacon, located at MS 258, the Joan of Arc Educational Complex. That's 154 West 93rd Street. Beacons are traditional community centers. I guess if you think in the old school community center, they're after-school programs. They often serve kids really directly from that school, so there's less opportunity for school-age children to participate in those programs. But they do have special events, and particularly the community centers are specifically required to have community events. They have at least one health fair every year, and then a number of adult programs from yoga to dance to ballet, and then a host of sports leagues. And so a very traditional sort of after-school program. It does operate in the evenings and on Saturdays. And so most students depart at 6, but then there are evening programs that run until 8 o'clock on the weekdays. And then on Saturdays, we operate from 10 to 6. And so the Beacon programs, again, we have 3 Beacon programs, but one that is directly located in the community board. A program that is probably pretty well known and is certainly nationally known as the Option Center. And then I'll talk a bit about the Options Institute. The Option Center does nationally renowned work in college access and success. And so access obviously being preparing young people to enter into college, and success being making sure that they can graduate. The Option Center takes a particular interest in students who are first generation college goers, students who come from marginalized districts, and obviously many of the young people, particularly in NYCHA developments. We have a great relationships with many NYCHA boards, and then just the schools in the district. Many of our programs feed into the Option Center. So many, for instance, students at both Star Learning Center and Goddard Beacon actually participate in the Options program. And again, the Option Center attaches someone generally from 11th grade, but attaches a specific advisor to a young person who will actually walk them through the process from financial aid to college choice. In addition, the Option Center offers scholarships. So there is also some dollars available. As we know, that's often a challenge. I have a 16-year-old we're going on a college tour to my alma mater, UVA, in Georgetown on Monday. And as you might imagine, looking at those costs, we are going to be looking at scholarships quite heavily. So that's a huge part of what we help young people to see and envision, is how you can not only get into college, but find the right setting where you're not coming out with thousands of dollars in loans. The other part of the Option Center is the Options Institute. And the Options Institute is really interesting because it's actually for professionals. So for those training programs where we actually train adults from a range of spheres and actually nationally to come in and learn about, sort of how to effectively, drawing obviously on our decades of knowledge on how to effectively engage young people, and particularly young people who are first generation college goers, immigrants, and other marginalized groups, about sort of how to talk about college and encourage young people to attend. And again, that program is located on Cathedral Parkway, 110th Street, right over there. Excuse me, right over there, of course, from Morningside Park. Lincoln Square, excuse me. Lincoln Square, and again, I highlighted just at the beginning of my presentation, Lincoln Square. We operate a number of programs there. And again, I've sort of been talking through the lens of youth programs, but I'll certainly highlight some of our other programs. Lincoln Square is a great example. While there are a number of youth programs, there's also an older adult center and a preschool program, which is currently we had to do some work on our kitchen, but is going to be relaunched in the next couple of months. In terms of our youth programs, in addition to the COFA program, which I described, which serves young people from 14 to 24, we also have a number of after-school programs, a fee-based after-school program, but then also a program through DYCD, Compass Explore. Again, one of the things I'll start highlighting, and frankly, is if you might imagine being in this work for 30 years, understanding budgetary priorities and how to sort of help people advocate on your behalf is a big deal. And one of the issues, one of the casualties in the budget was the Compass Explore program. And so while a lot of programs were saved with Mayor Adams' sort of new budget, that unfortunately was a program that is going to sunset. There's a small amount of funding, about $40,000, that is actually going away. Unfortunately, we've not heard a lot of clarity from DYCD about what is to replace it. In addition, Lincoln Square also, as I mentioned, runs older adult programs, and that's a way for me to transition to talking about some of the other programs. We offer older adult programs on the west side, but also on the east side. We offer Meals on Wheels programs, and so we deliver, I think the number is over 90,000 people per year, or meals per year. It's a huge number. And again, our Meals on Wheels program, in part through our partnership with the Isaac Center. The Isaac Center and Goddard Riverside merged about 2 years ago. The Isaac Center has a long history in doing Meals on Wheels. And so we were able to bring those programs together where we now serve a significant swath of Manhattan through those programs. Before I transition, and again, I only put together a couple slides. I was hoping to just chat a bit. I want to highlight two programs that are not in the community board, but are really important. One was a program that used to be in the NYCHA development, Douglas, which was Edward R. Reynolds West Side High School, one of the first alternative schools in New York City. Unfortunately, it was moved to the east side. We put up a bit of a fight, obviously complicated a bit by our status as receiving funds from the DOE, but unfortunately, despite a lot of efforts to advocate, including from Gail Brewer, we were unfortunately unable to stop the program from moving. It has since moved to 106th and Park. It does still serve young people from across the city, including quite a few who were already attending the program last year and who lived in Douglas and other surrounding neighborhoods. That program provides internships. It's an alternative school, so it's accelerated credit attainment. So young people who are behind in credits have a great opportunity to sort of make up those credits and prepare. That school has seen a huge influx of new New Yorkers, immigrants. I believe the last count, there were about 70 in a school of about 300, so a big number. And obviously, one of the challenges been in a program that features paid internships is helping young people to work through the process to get work permits, because obviously they're not able to be paid without that documentation. So the LTW program was formerly on the west side, but again, now on the east side, but does serve students from across the city. And then the last program I wanted to highlight was the Education and Workforce Development Program, which is a program operated out of the Isaac Center. As I mentioned, we merged about 2.5 years ago. And the reason I highlight is that we've really done a lot of inroads into programs like Lincoln Square and LTW when it was on the west side to really bring those students into the opportunities. Education and Workforce Development operates education programs, including GED and pre-GED. But I think probably what it's more known for is it operates training programs, workforce development programs that include paid internships. And now we've actually in 4 different areas. We have a culinary program. We operate the largest publicly funded culinary program in the city. That program is for young people 18 to 24. We operate a new program, a media arts program, which, as you might imagine, with young people all very interested in being media stars, that program has had a lot of interest. So that's in partnership with theater in Brooklyn, Crown Hill Theaters. We offer a partnership with Perscolis to do technology program. We're the Manhattan satellite partner for Perscolis, and obviously Perscolis is very well known in terms of technology training. And that program does not have an age cap, so it is open to anyone over 18, so not just young people or young adults, but all ages. And it's actually really exciting to see our 21-year-olds and our 60-year-olds in the same classroom learning together. It's really awesome to see that. And then finally, we offer a healthcare program, which trains young people to be CNAs. And so that program does only go up to age 24. But all of those programs feature paid internships and then long-term job supports. And as I mentioned, those programs are all available to our students on the West Side. And because we're one organization, we've done a lot of work in sort of creating a streamlined system to make referrals so that, right, people really feel the breadth of the organization. So if you're on a program operating out of the Amsterdam houses, you still know you have all these other resources. And that's obviously one of the exciting things about Goddard Riverside. I put there my email address, which is in the bottom, dasamuels@goddard.org, Damian Samuels. And obviously I put our website. There's a lot of information. And again, I've only been talking really through the lens of youth programs, but certainly there's a lot more information, and I'm happy to share more. I could certainly talk about programs that are also outside of the district that do serve a number of young people, including our number of people, including our resource center that looks at benefits, entitlements, and job supports, emergency funding, but there's a range of programs. So I'm going to stop there because I actually want to get to the second part of what we discussed. And Kristen did a great job in sort of framing the conversation for me, so thank you. And so first, I'll stop there, and then I want to talk about sort of priorities, funding, and how and there are specific areas where I think we always could use your support in advocating. So first, let me stop and just answer any questions about those programs I've highlighted, and I'm happy to sort of provide additional context after this meeting.
Just Blanche, Lawton, just a quickie question. You said you're going to go into funding in
Yes.
your, okay, so I guess I'll hold my question, but none of these programs are cheap. So my curiosity is the source of your fundings
Sure.
for some of the various programs, but I can wait until you finish the next part of your presentation, because you may cover some of my questions there.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm happy to definitely circle back. Let's talk about
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you because it's always amazing. We, like, Goddard is a well-known entity in the community, in the neighborhood, but every time you present it, I was like, whoa, they are doing so much. And you have an amazing track record, so it's good to be familiar with it. You're more about the programming going on. I too have like super specific funding questions.
Sure.
Only, I know it's sort of boring, like life shouldn't all come down to money, but we have this lens
does.
of getting to ask from the city council. So even though I think the projects you do are much more exciting than just dollars and cents, that's like kind of the frame we're looking through.
If I can
Absolutely.
add something here.
Sure.
So hi, Damon. I'm so glad you could come. I've been involved with Goddard for over 35 years, and
Awesome.
I was on the board of the St. Matthew St. Timothy's Neighborhood Center while we merged with you. So one of the things we're tasked force as a community board is to come up with a district needs statement for the district. And we're looking at the fiscal year 26. You can see on our website, or I can send you what some of our budget or capital and expense budget priorities were for 2025. I met with Susan and went over them last year. But we are looking for our capital and expense budget priorities for fiscal year 2026. I know we haven't started fiscal year 25 until July, but and I know some programs were defunded, and we certainly can request funding for that. I know the funding, the Explorers program was like $40,000, and you know we could put that back in. We asked for COLA increases across the board, and that was basically what we asked for. But we are looking for district needs. So if you're seeing a trend of students needing X or Y, that's something we can put in the district needs. If you're seeing that there's not enough daycare, we can put that into the district needs.
Sure.
If those are the kinds of things we're looking for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely wanted to just make sure everyone was familiar with the youth programs. One of the things I think all of us, if you've been in this business long enough, in order to keep the lights on, you have to get very creative and have a wide reach. So I'm very familiar with all the budget strategies, particularly for these programs, and happy to talk. One of the things, and this will sort of transition, and Ms. Lawton, I'll definitely get to your questions. One of the things that we've noticed is sort of talk about needs. The pandemic, obviously, right? And I keep saying this to people. I like to, let's all step back. Let's give ourselves grace. We've all lived through an unprecedented event together, but it has caused ripples, which I think some we could predict and others haven't. One, the educational loss that we've seen from young people has been off the charts. The STAR program is a great way to track that, because that program, because they've been so successful in tutoring students, have a really good use of data to see, they had very few students who were sort of failing. They may have come to them failing, but after a semester working together, that number quadrupled immediately after the pandemic, right? And just the young people's ability to retain information in homes where we didn't know what was going on. So the first thing is support for tutoring programs and others. STAR does not receive a lot of city funding. Most of its funding comes from the state. And then, frankly, just the Goddard board believes it's important. So we are always looking for city investment. And particularly given what's going on with young people, that's a huge area. The second thing that I'll highlight is sort of related is mental health. I primarily work with older young people. That's sort of my jam, is the disaffected young people. And looking at the statistics, I read a statistic last year that 50% of all young people between 16 and 22 reported anxiety or depression. That's reported, right? So half of all young people nationally reported anxiety and depression, which, as we know, there's a greater number that is unreported. Young people are struggling, and so support from mental health programs has never been more needed. We have been constantly looking to create linkages. I was chatting down my colleagues' name before us, IncludeNYC, because there's a constant need to connect to mental health providers. So funding to support mental health, but also for our program, where we don't offer formal mental health, we do case management. It's often about navigation programs. So in other words, programs that can help find you the support and build up networks of linkages. And so COFA is a navigation program. Ed Workforce does a significant amount of navigation. LTW, as you might imagine, helping New Yorkers sort of find their way, is doing a huge amount of navigation. So programs that sort of help connect people to these resources, particularly around mental health, are incredibly important. The last area that I'll sort of highlight in terms of trends, and then again, this is something that directly related to the pandemic, one of the things that our field, I think, has done very well in New York City and workforce development is really track the journey of out of school, out of work young people. And so Jobs First NYC is probably the preeminent sort of voice on this matter. But, New York had been in a great trend of pushing those numbers down over a 10 to 15 year period prior to the pandemic, and really had gotten to places we hadn't seen in terms of, out of school, out of work young people. A lot of euphemisms for it. They used to be called at risk, now opportunity youth, but that group of young people, as you might imagine, because of the pandemic, we don't need to detail it, those industries where young people are often employed the most, they took the heaviest losses. I remember seeing a stat that 30% of all job losses were from young people, Black and brown young people between 20 and 24, right? That demographic, if you were in retail, if you were in food service, those jobs went away. And so while some have come back, what we see is young people aren't as interested in going back into those jobs, often because of wages. So another huge priority is workforce development programs to sort of reverse this worrying trend of those numbers shooting back up, where, again, for a good 10 or 15 years, out of school, out of work young people were sort of declining, and those numbers literally have skyrocketed. As you might imagine, there was a corresponding spike immediately after the pandemic in property crimes, robberies, those kind of issues which occur when young people are out of work. Unfortunately, they'll make some other choices, which we know are negative. So the other sort of priority area are programs that offer workforce development, that offer sort of navigation, outreach strategies, and all of those, again, are funded in different priorities through discretionary contracts from the city council, through both their citywide initiatives, and then obviously individual members have been great I highlighted TOEFL program, comes with funding from Gail Brewer and Adrian Adams, and obviously State Senator Linda Rosenthal. But again, all of those sort of priorities, and again, that's the youth lens. Certainly, I'm aware that outside of the youth lens, there are certainly a lot of priorities. Let me stop there and answer questions.
Does anyone else have other questions? If not, I have some questions about the Compass program, just because I was very familiar with it. I've been involved in schools in D3 for a long time. And you kind of answered this already, that they haven't told you what comes next.
Right.
They're not offering that. And how many students is that going to affect at the end of the day? How many were enrolled in Compass?
Sure.
And then,
not a
what's
huge
the
program. Yeah, certainly it's still important. About 50 young people. I think the most recent was about 48 young people. So again, not the biggest scale, but certainly if you multiply that across the city, because this is something that's going across the city, for us is maybe 50. But now when you look at a citywide program being ended, who knows the true impact that that's going to have.
Kristen, what is Compass?
I believe it's like an after-school program.
Yes, Compass Explorer is an after-school program. It specifically looks at project-based learning, and so that's a big function. Our program focuses on STEM. Young people complete service learning projects. They're engaged in traditional after-school, but then they also sort of learn about an issue in their neighborhood, graffiti, litter, water table, and then they'll sort of come up with projects to highlight that. So again, that's a citywide program.
Kirsten, are you finished?
Yep.
Okay. Damien, I'll just ask one at a time. Many of your programs are funded by DYCD. How is that funding going? Has it increased, decreased, or what?
Sure. It's a range. Our Ed Workforce program is very popular with DYCD. We've been given a couple of pilot programs, and so funding's actually increased pretty dramatically. Obviously, you just heard me highlight the Explorer program is
right.
sunsetting, so that's a DYCD program that's going away. We're always perpetually worried about summer youth employment. We actually operate a summer youth employment program.
Right.
There have been no indications that it's in jeopardy. But that's always a worry. So it's a bit of a mixed bag with DYCD. For the most part, though, I would say we have not been affected adversely. The one pocket is the Explorers program. The other issue, just while highlighting sort of areas of concern, is within New York City Public Schools, the LTW program was funded in part with stimulus funds. And those dollars are all ending in June. And there has been no plan. And there's a pretty wide advocacy effort underway. There's already been a couple of meetings with folks in Tweed and to try to get the mayor highlighted. But that's a program that serves, that's a significant, again, the school that I highlighted serves about 300 people. And again, that's also a citywide program where there's not been a lot of clarity as to what's coming next. And that's something, frankly, where the lights are blinking a little brighter, that we're really concerned about the funding. Again, no one has sort of given clarity from New York City Public Schools as to what's coming next.
Okay, your Meals on Wheels, 90,000 meals per year is a costly item. How do you manage that? How do you fund that?
Sure. Again, I'll speak from just my knowledge of that's DFTA funding. And so DFTA, I wish my colleague Crystal was on here. She could tell you a bit. DFTA is very tight with their dollars. There's quite a few hurdles. There's always a challenge. Having said that, we have a really strong reputation. And so we've actually expanded our contracts where some others have contracted. But no, DFTA funding pays for Meals on Wheels. Obviously, there's also some DOH, MH funding that supports sort of older adult centers. But again, I forgive me, I can't speak as direct.
So I've talked to Crystal about this, and part of the funding problem for the congregate meals is that there are certain requirements that it has to meet certain nutrition, as also with Meals on Wheels. It must meet certain nutritional mandates. And that as we know, the food has gotten more expensive. And so they're often, to meet all the nutritional requirements and to provide healthy meals, the funding is not quite adequate. So that is something that we definitely we'll be looking at in our budget requests.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that clarity. Again, I represent the youth programs, but thank you for
Okay.
giving that clarity.
I talk with Crystal all the time. So.
Crystal, again, has mastered the transition from, she used to just manage. Crystal and I, we were both employed with Isaacs. I was an Isaac Center employee. When we merged, both Crystal and I took on larger portfolios that include both Isaacs and Goddard. So Crystal now manages, as I do, across both. So again, thank you for that clarity, because she really would know best.
I'm sorry, Blanche, go ahead.
No, I'll stop. Because I was going to ask about the merger with Isaacs, but I'll hold.
Sure, feel free though. Happy to answer any questions. Again, I was an Isaac Center employee, so I certainly can speak about it from that perspective. And again, the reason I think was very clear when we merged. Really, organizations of the size of Isaacs, typically you're on the knife's edge. Isaacs was about $9 or $10 million in total funding. Organizations that size, if you don't get one big contract renewed, you're talking about losing a significant chunk of your staff. And so I actually built up the Ed Workforce program. We were at 4 employees when I started. There's about 36 now. And again, so, we've done a lot of great work, but we realized we needed the kind of infrastructure that Goddard can provide, and frankly, the reach. And so it's actually been a great marriage in that, we fit. Goddard didn't really do workforce development. That's one of the strong points of Isaacs. Isaacs is one of the first Meals on Wheels provider. Goddard obviously has a long history of Meals on Wheels. So there were some natural linkages where the infrastructure that's needed really in New York City to be a CBO that can actually last is pretty extensive. And organizations the size of Isaacs, you're always sort of hoping you get the next contract. So it's actually overall been very positive. We are actually finalizing the merger this year. Actually, all of the paperwork has been sent to the Attorney General. We're just, waiting, which we expect will be sometime in July. But one of the things is we're going to be keeping the Isaac Center name in the same way that when Lincoln Center merged, Lincoln Square is still the name that the community members know, and it's important that they have that recognition. So the Isaac Center certainly won't be going away. It'll probably just be a tagline of Goddard Riverside.
And the neighborhood center kept its name as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Although we lost many of the programs. We lost Meals on Wheels. We lost the Head Start. But what we gained when Lincoln Square and the neighborhood center merged with Goddard is we probably would have had to fold up all of our programs had we not merged. And Goddard is able to hire staff at a level that a smaller nonprofit just can't hire. So we were able to have people that could write grants. We were able to have people that could, financial people that were at a level that really understood finances, human resources. You don't need human resources at 3 centers. You need human resources at one place. So there was a tremendous savings of many really viable programs that would have been lost to the community otherwise.
Absolutely. You said it very well. In my former life with Isaacs, I wrote all the grants, I wrote up all the write-ups, all the HR, like that level of infrastructure has really allowed us, again, to continue to do great work. And a couple of the things that we're really excited about, we're engaging in a whole family project, which has investment throughout the agency. We're really going to be trying to, within all of our programs, targeting the whole family. So even though we're working with a young person in the home, we know that, people exist in systems in their homes. And so that's an effort that, again, we've been donating. It's a longitudinal effort. We're going to be working that over the next 5 years. We've created a whole educational pathways program to really sort of link all of our varying youth programs together, sort of the hub of a wheel of a bicycle, right? So all these spokes flow out to the other Goddard programs. So it's actually been very exciting work, and definitely happy to talk about it, but definitely nothing but positives.
Thanks. I had a question about the STAR program, because like you said, there are 3 broad categories of like need or post-pandemic, or like educational needs, mental health needs, and workforce development. So has the STAR program been able to expand, or have you been limited by this is as big as it is? So what are the changes going on there?
Absolutely. We want to expand, and just finding the dollars to be able to do it. It exists in a weird space, and you know, the fundraising landscape is always interesting. Tutoring doesn't really sell. And so it really, and that's not what they do. It's really educational advocacy and educational supports. And so, you know, we've got some exciting funders. We do receive funding from the state. There are a couple of small foundations that support us, but really getting the city to invest in this program is critical. We would love to sort of expand it. And so there are definitely talks about taking it slightly, having, you know, STAR is never going to move, but having a sort of a model where we increase and add an additional STAR in the district, and then potentially on the east side. So again, there's a lot of opportunity, but yes, that program does not receive any city funding. We've tried quite a bit, even in my now 2.5 years managing that program. It's been very challenging to get funding from the city.
Roughly how many students are in the STAR program?
STAR serves about 150 students who are enrolled, and then they have a separate summer program that serves about 80. And so obviously there's not as much crossover as you might think from the summer to the school year.
And the students are from all different schools, correct?
Yeah, but 90% are within, you know, 20 blocks from the different NYCHA facilities that are sort of, you know, peppered around. Douglas has a lot of young people come from Douglas.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Now, the summarizing program, did I hear that that's fading?
No, actually, summarizing is still a go. Completely. We've gotten our funding stuff just
good.
week. It's been complicated. The old model certainly worked better. The DOE inserting itself, or again, New York City Public Schools, made it a bit more challenging. It didn't help, if I could be frank, but the first year was really rough. Last year was slightly better. It looks from so far already, it's far more organized. The issue is always rosters. If you rely on the DOE for rosters, you're going to get young people who moved out of the district months ago who are no longer attending. And so using that is always very challenging, as opposed to using the CBOs to drive enrollment, where we know the parents, we know the people we're talking to,
Right.
we know that this is a real young person who attends consistently. Let's prioritize a slot for them. So that's been a challenge, but we've been working through kinks. But yeah, summarizing funding is solid. There was some, it's a great point. There was an initial in Mayor Adams' first budget, in his first, I forget what to call it, there was some thought of them going after LTW, so, I mean, going after summarizing, but it was subsequently taken out.
Okay, that's what I thought I read or heard.
Yeah.
And have you received the enrollment already? I imagine because it's that DOE bureaucracy, they've opened it already, right?
Yeah,
to sign up for something?
it opened and filled up in 10 minutes. Again, that's also the challenge, which is always, and if we talk about another area, is slots, right? Like there are always parents, including parents whose children attend that school during the Beacon program, and they don't get a slot because they, you know, got on 11 minutes after the deadline instead of 10. I mean, it moves very quickly. Last year, there were lots of glitches in the system. It didn't glitch this year. We're very happy, but like people couldn't even get in. So then that obviously, as you might imagine, ratcheted up the tension. But again, so far, so good. But we certainly always need to increase slots in that program. The challenge is, again, it's a complicated system. Forgive me for being granular. The principals don't always want a lot more kids in their building. So while we're like the demand, the principal who's not as connected to this building now has to have 200 or 300 kids they're not as familiar with. They tend to shy away from it.
No, I get that. And I've heard that from the beginning when they started summarizing.
Yeah.
Oh. Go ahead, Roberto. Does anyone else in person have any questions?
I had one question for Damien to follow up. What is your kind of ideal dollar amount you'd be looking for from the city to fund the program to kind of get you to fulfilling your mission and the goals you want to achieve?
Sure, that's a great question. Yeah, so we have a couple programs that are well funded. You know, that $10,000 to $13,000 per student number is probably the most realistic. We have some programs that fund at about $6,000, particularly for the year-round programs. And that's just the challenge. You know, if you're going to hire staff and you're going to have some real activities, and particularly if you're talking about older young people, you've got to incentivize participation. You've got to provide Metro cards. You've got, like, there's a range of things. And then frankly, we are very clear, you got to pay them. You got to come up with some internships. They've got to find a way to earn dollars, particularly when you're talking about older young people, right? A 19-year-old, if you're not giving them some dollars, it's hard to do a 6-week program, 8-week program. So building enough funding so that we can offer the kind of supports that we know that young people need, and just people need, forgive young people, because we run a program for older adults and they have the same needs, right? I need to know how to get childcare, and I can't pay my rent this month. I need rent arrears. I need supports. And so being able to fund the kind of case management staff, you need to have, one of our program funds 13 per student. I think that's probably the fairest. The other program that we have, I think, is pretty fair, is around 10. But that range, I think, is frankly the kind of level of funding that we need to effectively sustain these programs. We often say city programs keep the lights on, city funding keeps the lights on, and private funding is how you innovate. So we're always looking for the foundations, but we still got to keep the lights on. So we need the dollars from the city to be able to operate.
And so just to kind of take that $10,000 to $13,000 per student, and you want to grow STAR, and STAR serves 150 students plus an additional 80 students for the summer program. So kind of when you look at your projections for fiscal 26, kind of what's the overall student population you would be serving? I'm just trying to get an aggregate dollar amount.
Sure. That's a great question. That program right now, the budget is about $600,000 for that program. And again, I think that is with people working on the weekends and it needs investment. So, ideally, I think with the right kind of funding, it would be easy to grow that program by double. It would be easy to get to 250. Now, again, space would be an issue. Part of the success of that program is deep roots in the community. We would need to make sure to find a place that, again, is in that community. But we certainly could easily get to 250, per year. And again, potentially the same kind of doubling of the summer program with the right level of funding.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure.
That was great, Damien. I'm actually shocked that you had a number per student, right? At hand, off the top of your head. That was very impressive.
DYCD contracts, they all squeeze you, so you got to get familiar with that stuff.
I think that might be all for us tonight, right? Any more questions? Roberta, you're good?
This is great. This is, Damien, I can't thank you enough. This is so helpful.
No, thank you for having me. And again, I put my my email in the presentation. I can throw it in the chat, or I don't know if you want to share it, but just, I'm happy to sort of make all the connections. Again, that's part of what we do, is connect, and we're trying to create this tapestry, this web approach. So I'm happy to make connections to other programs. And again, thank you for the opportunity to address the community.
Because it also helps us with some of the smaller, there are some smaller organizations in the Upper West Side that work with kids. So it helps us sort of look at the whole overview.
And we're always interested in partnering. Again, we can't all, there's enough young people out there. I've often said that. They can't all be served by the same place. So we are certainly always referring, we're partnering people that do the same thing. We have capacity issues at times. And so we are happy to to join in that opportunity to, create, again, a real support net, right? So that people feel like there are multiple options for them to turn to.
Damon, just good luck with your son.
Oh, yes. Thank
you. Good luck.
Oh, my Lord. We'll see.
I'm on the same circuit. I was in the same place this past weekend. We were touring UVA. So.
Oh, awesome. Absolutely.
Circuit.
Awesome.
Wow.
So, good company.
Your kids may end up in the same school.
Well,
who knows?
My wife and I met at UVA, so we're really pushing him that way. I think it's too big. It's too big for him, I think, but we'll see. It'll be his choice. Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And again, happy to answer any questions. If you have any follow-up, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Damien.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Presentation is done. Yeah. Wow. Really knew the numbers. I was asking the boring questions, like we said with Roberta, we really are looking at with an eye towards the DNS. And that was really useful because Damien had like the broad categories to start
Right.
like focusing on. And then we can come up with like that question that you had, Kevin, that can come up with specific numbers, real specific
Right.
asks. I did look at our requests from last year. Our special education request was wildly vague. So it does not surprise me we got no traction on that. I think that if we're looking at a request for special, it literally just said more special education services in New York City public schools. Like that's pretty vague. I think realistically that we do think there are needs around special ed, but we definitely need to come up with a more specific ask.
But special ed is a big basket with a lot of
Exactly,
different things in it.
right, so maybe we need to focus, it was too broad like that, right? So is there
And
a
other-
specific that we think might be cut, that is being cut, or a program that needs to be expanded, is there?
Right. you're
Kristen,
doing
and
that from the-
also, since
Roberta.
Damien said that 50% of the children are having mental health issues, it shows even more a need for social workers in each of the public schools. So I'm going to again suggest that committee members divide up the parent advocates in the schools and call them and find out which schools have social workers and which schools don't. So we can specifically ask for social workers in the schools that don't have social workers. So if PS1 has a social worker and PS2 doesn't, we can say we want a social worker for PS2 based on the fact that 50% of the children have mental health needs.
Okay, that's good. So to really be very detailed,
Again,
school X, Y, and Z needs social worker.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be very specific, because if I'm on the receiving end and I'm making decisions, if I have something that's concrete, then that's going to be more of a selling point to me versus someone else who's providing, vague numbers and vague requests.
Yeah,
I, like I said, the special education is just a huge bucket, but would we want to think about West Park and the NEST program and support them if that actually does happen?
yeah, because we've built a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really a great idea to see what
Maybe
specific
playground
supports they need around
Yeah.
this. And also, because we have a relationship with them this year and they're potentially facing this move, what other requests they have. Like, I'm sure there will be some that are gonna come down to SCA no matter what they do initially. There'll be more additional build out.
I mean, my question is, you're probably the most qualified to say this. My understanding of West Park is that it isn't a special needs school. It has some children in it that have special needs,
The NEST program.
but it is not like a.
No, it's not.
like 75 or anything like that.
It has twofold. It has in their gen ed population, like all schools, it has a special ed IEP population, right? Theirs is disproportionately high for the district. Secondly, they have this unique programming, which is the NEST program, right? Which resides within a general education school, like West Prep. So it's not D75, but it is a very unique program, and I believe has
Right.
Very specific additional funding stream.
Right, but I mean, that's like a lot of other schools have 12-to-1 classes. Well,
Right.
and they may have, I did one school where we had a whole wing that was D75, but it was within a school.
Yeah, technically it's a different school if it's D75.
Right, but it was still,
physically.
it was physically and
Yeah.
functionally,
Yeah,
they didn't have their own gym, they didn't have their own
right,
nurse, they
yeah,
had a room that taught daily living skills.
right. So the NEST program is truly a part of West Prep. It is under the principal, Carlin Washington, and everything reports out, like goes through him. So it's not as separate an entity. But it does probably have specific needs. We know already that they have a playground need.
Yeah,
We
but
know that, right?
I mean, I think I'm getting off the subject, but I think they're doing a disservice to themselves by presenting themselves as a special needs school. They have children that have special.
Yes,
It's a different,
right, it's
There
not
are-
a D75.
there are schools that I've done in Queens where they asked, if they needed window guards on the 5th floor, and I said, your kids have very strong arms, and the answer was no, they throw the furniture out the windows.
Yeah,
Different, it's not. It's not
right, a different kind of need,
We don't have any school like that here.
right, well, we do have D75 schools. but
What?
We do
We
have,
do, yes, I know, but we don't have schools where kids are throwing, particularly throwing
Out
furniture
there.
out of teachers' cars.
that is true.
We
The
do it all.
the other request that we have that rolls over a year is, we keep requesting an additional accessible school building. Again, like it works better if the school itself is advocating for it. We don't want to like impose on high. In the past, the IS 44, the 144 building, which is
O'Shea.
on the O'Shea building on 77th Street. So it has computer, dual language, Anderson, someone else. So that building has requested in the past, they're tantalizingly, my daughter went to school in that building. It's tantalizingly close to being accessible, but not quite, which I think is why we keep thinking it can't be that hard. The reality is it is much harder than we as parents imagined in the beginning. But they do have an elevator, which is unusual. However, it's not accessible from the outside because when you go in a building, there's like a couple of steps up.
Do we know what the cost, do we know what the cost is for that?
You know, we knew it like 3 years ago. I guarantee you the number's totally different by
If we
now.
could find out the cost, it might be something that we ask for participatory budgeting from Gail if it's within the amount that she spends.
Beyond that,
Whatever the
but
cost
maybe it
was.
could be part of it.
Whatever the cost
If
was.
it's more than that, then of course we have to just keep requesting it.
Yeah, it's a big number. Do you know that much?
Did we request something for new arrivals and asylum seekers last
We
year?
did, and they were all, again, I feel like we could
That might have been big.
make it more specific. I just want to pull it up to look at them.
I was
The
intrigued by
problem with the new arrivals is that many of them have now been given 60-day notices, and there's a whole bunch of people that have moved out of the district, even though the kids are still entitled to go to their original public schools. And for some families, it's just too far to get to the school.
Maybe it's funding D3 open arms or something.
I think at the
Yeah.
next D3 open arms meeting, we can ask Cheryl to ask all the schools to provide numbers.
Yeah,
And then-
I'm gonna try to attend that meeting. It's the first Wednesday, right, of the month?
It's
in
the third
morning?
Wednesday, but why don't,
Third.
Kristen, why don't you and I send an email to Cheryl with a specific
Yeah.
request prior to the meeting, so people can come to that meeting with answers.
And we also always reach out to advocates for children, because they do have the really like hard numbers and they always have specific policy requests. But if we have time in our meeting schedule, maybe we'll ask them, because I feel like they haven't presented here for a while. Like, I don't think they need to come tell us about their programs every 6 months, but like periodically, it would be good to hear from them. So if we could schedule that, I will try to do that. Maybe for
Maybe
June.
ask some specific questions to come with information.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they have a lot of programming, so if we give them a specific agenda.
And they deal with like education broadly, right? Like not just specific categories. Is there-
Not just special ed categories, but they do advocate primarily around special ed and
Right.
underserved. So they've done a lot of work with like migrant communities. They've done a lot of work through the special ed communities. Yeah. And I think we're done. Do you have anything else to say?
No, that I can think of.
Want to tell us about May? Who's on deck for May?
So May, we have a speaker from the library.
All right, which would, let me know.
No, it's,
I think it's Central, right,
Central,
Blanche?
yeah.
What's Central? It's in it, no.
No, like the.
Oh, the main branch.
The main, no, like the bureaucratic hierarchy
The
of
administration.
NYPL,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Did we lose Blanche? Think so.
No, I'm
Blanche?
here.
Here.
All
yeah,
right.
and actually it was Blanche's introduction.
Yeah,
So thank you again, Blanche, for making the
My
introduction.
pleasure.
all right. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Motion.
Wonderful. Adjourn. Thank you.
Kristen, I'll just add, the Advocates for Children, they have been to YEL 2 or 3 times. So there is a connection.
Yeah,
So if you want me to do this virtual introduction of you and Kevin, I'll be happy to do that.
that would be great, Blanche. Well, we'll touch base like after the meeting, because I know some folks that advocate for children as well.
Okay,
so
that's
let's-
fine, that's fine. But they
Yeah.
offered to, they were very generous with their time. I think even the president came and somebody else. If you need me to do a virtual introduction, I'd be happy to do it, okay?
That would be really helpful. Thank you, Blanche.
Okay.
Ira, did you sign in?